Next up is Dr. Scott Goodrick. Dr. Goodrick is director of the Center for Forest Health and Disturbance of the U.S. Forest Service Southern Research Station in Athens. Scott has been a research scientist with the Forest Service for 18 years, working in the areas of fire behavior and smoke management. It's all yours, Scott.
All right, thank you. All right, All right, so we're gonna go over some online tools for managing smoke. I had hoped to do a lot of live demos, but the Georgia Forestry site being down is gonna kind of take away a little of that. So when we're thinking about managing smoke, we basically are dealing with three questions. How much smoke we're gonna produce, where's that smoke gonna go, and what impact is it gonna have when it gets there? And in answering these questions, we've got a couple of different things we have to think about. For how much smoke, it's all about how much emissions we're going to create. So it's all about getting an idea of how much fuel is out there, what the moisture content is, and that helps us determine how much of that fuel is going to get consumed and turned into smoke. For the where's the smoke going to go, we need information about winds, atmospheric stability, topography. And the last question, the what impact will it have? Well, then we're dealing with smoke sensitive targets such as hospitals, schools, nursing homes, the general public, roads at night particularly. So we're going to try to address a lot of these different pieces of smoke management. So we're going to kind of walk through three different tools that can be used that are available online. We're going to probably spend most of our time on V-Smoke, but we're also going to talk about some other tools, one called Blue Sky Playground, another one, PB Piedmont, which is especially designed for smoke movement at night. And we're going to talk a little bit about what each tool does, what are the tool's strengths, and what are its limitations. All right, so V-Smoke, this is what's referred to as a simple Gaussian plume model. That's really not that important to really get a handle on, other than the fact that it's really going to give you just a straight line plume and give you some idea of what the ground concentrations are going to be. The normal output is color coded by Air Quality Index, the AQI. We'll show a little bit about that here when we get into the tool. This is best for burns conducted with fairly constant weather, because this plume is going to be a straight line. It's not going to respond really if the wind shifts during the day. So if you have fairly consistent wind directions, it's a good tool. Topography is not directly included in the model, so you have to kind of think about it when you're looking at your output. And we'll discuss that as we go through the tool. The case study I'm going to show is going to be for North Carolina, so there was plenty of topography involved, but the model still worked just fine. It gave information that was useful. That's kind of the thing about models. None of them are perfect, but some of them can be useful. An important key about V-Smoke is it's really telling you about during the day, during the active burning period. It's not going to be of any use to you at night in what smoke's going to do at night. So here is the link to the V-Smoke web implementation on the Georgia Forestry Commission website. Unfortunately, when I went there this morning, you basically get not available as they're having some server issues. So we're gonna, instead of doing something live, we're gonna walk through a case study that had been done for North Carolina. So this is the basic input, the basic form that you'll see, and it's designed to kind of walk you through the process of planning a burn. It's got the basic information of location. If you have your latitude, longitude of your burn unit, you can just directly enter it. or you can use the map interface to zoom in on the area and drop a map pin on it, and it'll automatically populate the latitude, longitude. Kind of get into some of the fire information about how big it's going to be and how long you're expecting the active flaming part of the burn to be. Again, this is just an estimate. There's a little bit in here about ignition method. It's really only got two choices. It's trying to keep it fairly simple. It's either, you know, a backing or spot type ignition, or it's looking at head fires and aerial ignition. To simplify getting a fuel load, it's got some very simple little fuel types here you can choose between. It's got basically a grass, a shrub, a timber litter, and a slash model, and they range between light and heavy loads. But what it's going to do when you select something out of that is it's just going to populate this little field here of tons per acre. And if you have a value, you can just go ahead and enter it and change it. You don't even have to use this. You can just go ahead and change it. And the same goes with the moisture scenarios. You just pick something, you know, one of these dry, moist, and it'll give you a starting point telling you about what fraction of your fuels is going to be consumed. If you think that you've got something different, you can play with it and directly change it. And so behind the scenes, it's going to go ahead and calculate your emissions for you and your heat release rate. These are all inputs that are needed for the model. You have to enter a little bit of weather information, being the mixing height and transport wind, speed, and direction. Normally from the weather forecast, you can get an idea about the atmospheric stability for the day. This would be a Turner stability class. It's often referred to in some of the forecasts. And this is something that can just be selected and played with. And then it's as easy as just clicking run the model. And here's some information on the air quality index that's designed to help you interpret the results. I mean, basically, when we're looking at it, we're looking to try to minimize the areas inside the orange, red, and dark red polygons. All right. So this one parameter down here, now these last two miscellaneous options, these are things that you can set, but they're set up above. This plume rise fraction is what's set by your choice of burn methodology. And what that's really trying to get at is the model is basically an adaptation of something that was used in industry for emissions from smokestacks. And to try to get things to look a little bit more like a fire, it's trying to balance how much of that smoke is getting, drifting from a ground release and how much of it is convectively up in a column. And so that choice in ignition method just kind of helps select that. And that's really just kind of providing an easy way for you to get an idea of what that number should be. It's something that you really don't have to play with that much, but it's there for advanced users to play with. So basically, if you set that burn, that fraction to 1, it's going to assume that all of your smoke goes all the way up to the top of the mixed layer and then spreads downward as it gets transported downwind. This would be what we would be using for an aerial ignition, is something up closer to that 1. If you're doing a pure backing fire, it's going to be a lot more of that release down near the surface. We're not going to have as much buoyancy to the smoke, so we're going to have it all kind of drifting off from a surface release. So in our case study, we're looking at a burn that was done on the Cherokee National Forest back in 2006. It was an 1,800 acre burn. The fuels were mostly chestnut oak, white oak litter. Area had not been burned in recent memory, so there was considerable fuel load. And the fuel consumption was actually estimated to be about 12 tons per acre. So here's a satellite view of the smoke plume from the burn. You can see the burn location here, and you can see that while it's not perfectly straight, you could see that, V smoke's not going to be too bad of a a projection for what this plume was going to do, or what it did do, because since this was taken after. Here's some look at what was recorded in Asheville, North Carolina. When they put the smoke in there, you can see that they produced a spike that got it up into the unhealthy for sensitive groups. So definitely one of those things you don't want to do with your fire. So here it is running through the V-Smoke implementation. We've got the location of the burn entered in. We update the fire size to 1,840 acres and estimate that it's going to be done over an 8-hour period. They were using a helicopter for the ignition. What was selected was litter heavy, and you can see that that only gave us 6 tons per acre. So we just went in and changed it to 12. Oops. We went with a dry fuel moisture scenario, which was basically going to assume that we were going to consume 100% of that litter, which is pretty consistent with what was observed. We updated the mixing height, transport winds for what was forecast for the day, moderately unstable atmosphere. And then what would be done if we were doing this live is you'd click run model, and within a few minutes, you would get back a plume that looks like this. So here are our air quality index colored areas. And so you can see the moderate is the first one you normally see. So here's the will be the kind of the edge of our plume, and then the orange one is the next one in, and that's the unhealthy for sensitive individuals. And you can see that that extends all the way out. V-Smoke kind of has a cutoff in how far it will go out and carry out the simulation. So we've kind of reached the cutoff here at the edge. But you can see that that unhealthy for sensitive individuals extended all the way into Asheville, which matches up with what we actually observed in that case. You will have the option to download this output so that you could save it and store it with your burn plan. It comes in a KML file that you can import into Google Earth and see this overlaid with the Google Earth imagery and play with it there. In the web application, you can actually switch to the satellite view by clicking up in the upper right-hand corner. And so you would be able to see the streets, houses, and other areas if you zoomed in. Now, one thing that you can also do with V-Smoke is it allows you to explore some possibilities for mitigating your smoke impacts. You know, what could we do to reduce the impact? Well, one potential thing would be to take a little bit longer to burn that area so that we spread out those peak emissions over a longer period of time. And if we redid that, you know, we started with originally 6 hours. If we change it to 8 hours, you can see we pulled back the unhealthy smoke. We've narrowed up the unhealthy for sensitive. So a 2-hour difference improved it a little bit, but really didn't help mitigate our smoke impact. We could have considered delaying the burn and burning under a higher fuel moisture scenario, so we can see how that would have changed it. You know, originally we had a dry case where we had 100% consumption. If we went with the 70%, you can see that we've now pulled the unhealthy for sensitive individuals back, gotten it out of Asheville. So we've mitigated the worst of the air quality issues that we're getting into Asheville. What would the impact have been if we had broken the unit in half? We could go back in and change the area down, keep it burning for the same amount of time, and now you can see that the area of the polygon for the unhealthy smoke for sensitive individuals is pulled even further back, further mitigating our smoke impacts on Asheville. So that's kind of an indication of some of what you could do playing around with V-smoke to look at your smoke impacts. So this is best used for burns conducted under fairly constant weather. You can use it in areas of topography. You know, we just burned across the Appalachians there in North Carolina. So when I mentioned that you have to consider topography, you have to consider if you're burning up towards a ridge, you've got an elevated area that's going up higher in the smoke. So it's going to get something higher than what this model is indicating. And so those are the kind of considerations that you have to think about in dealing with this model. Now we're going to go through kind of quickly some of these other ones because we're not being able to do it live took a little bit longer than I had hoped. Blue Sky Playground is a tool that's available from the U.S. Forest Service. It's hosted out of the Pacific Northwest. It does have an option for you to do V-smoke, and it also has an option to do a model called high split. This allows you to get into conditions where you've got the weather changing. So if you're going to burn for a long period of time and it's expected that your winds are going to be shifting throughout the day, it would be a useful tool to use. And we'll kind of look at a quick demo of that. So the website will dump you into a little form. Oh, come on, don't do that. And you can come in and very much like the V-smoke form, it allows you to input your information. If you want to do it on a map, you can get the map and we can pull it all around and get down into the southeast to set our location. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. Just gonna roughly set it up there. And it's going to go ahead and you can see that it populated it with a fuel model from the FCCS fuel classification. If you know of a different fuel that you'd like to do, you can just click on the drop down and pick something that matches what you think. It does the same kind of moisture scenarios that we were talking about. And then you can pick a few other options. Again, I'm just going to jump through this because they're very similar to what we did with V-smoke.
Hey, Scott, you're still sharing your PowerPoint. Could you shut the window that you have the web browser open in?
Oh, well, then we'll jump back. Because we're going to run out of time anyways. One of the educations of doing this is that doing this on virtual technology, it's not as easy as it thought it would be. So anyways, the Blue Sky Playground has very similar forms to what we just showed with V-smoke. It just allows you to see a little bit more information. It's not quite as simple because it interfaces to both V-smoke and a more complex model that needs to get hourly information about consumption and emissions. All right. When you go to this site, you would have to use Blue Sky. You do have to register. It's just giving an email address and getting a password. They just have to be able to restrict who has access to it. All right, the last model I was going to talk about is the one specifically designed for nighttime burns. It is called PB Piedmont. It doesn't really tell you much about how much smoke is going to get there. It's just telling you where smoke at night is going to go. It's designed to follow the high resolution drainages in the topography. This graphic here, these little red and yellow dots represent smoke moving down the drainage towards the roadway. The differences between red versus yellow dots is yellow is just smoke, and red is a potential for the mixture of smoke and fog. So in this case, you would probably have much more likelihood of visibility problems following this line of smoke than what's happening over in these other drainages. Much greater problem for a visibility issue. Oops. And all right, so we're going to try to switch to the web browser.
We see it now.
All right. So this is the Piedmont interface. As with all of them, you can enter a location or just click on the map to get something. You enter in the date and times you want to burn. Now they're going to guide you on some of the inputs. Again, focusing on the fact that this is mostly for smoke at night. You know, you normally try to start at about 4 hours before sunset and then let it run through the next morning. This fuel type parameter, where it's basically either is it trees or grass, that's really just to control how fast it can move. If you're in trees, the wind's going to be a lot slower, a lot more drag than you get in a grass. So you can, you know, that's one you can play with. Now, I'm not going to run a live demo of this because it takes about 10-15 minutes for it to run. But I've pre-run a case here for North Georgia. And we'll just kind of step through some of the times. This started at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And you can see that during the day, it just had a plume running off here towards the northeast. As we step through, it kind of shows that the winds would have shifted to more out of the east. And you actually get a little bit of a shift as it's coming through. You can see that the model kind of captures that wind shift. And so late in the day, just after sunset, we've got the smoke basically blowing off to the west. And now as we go into the evening, we're going to start seeing the drainage flows develop and start taking that smoke that we had produced and drifted off towards the west. It's going to start bringing it into the drainages. And you'll see it start flowing down. Since we are the southeast, we get a lot of high humidity. It's going to start having a potential to combine with the smoke to produce fog. And as we move through towards early morning hours, you can see that our smoke from our burn, our 400-acre burn up here, has followed down this drainage and is looking to get to Highway 52 in this area as well as up here. And it actually, you know, spills across. So this tool is purely designed to give you an idea of where smoke is going to go at night. So in this case, Highway 76 here wouldn't be your major concern because you've got a little bit of a wind out of the east, which will keep the smoke off the road, but it is going to find a way to follow some of the drainages and cross some roads in other locations. And I think that's about what we had time for, to allow time for questions.
You still have about 5 minutes, Scott.
Oh, well, then we can jump back to Blue Sky and we can show what that looks like. So when Blue Sky calculates your emissions, you actually get something that you can download as a PDF report. And it shows you a lot more information than what you got from VSmoke. It's showing you your hourly emissions for both the flaming phase and the smoldering phase. gives you information about different constituents of the smoke, be it PM 2.5, or, if you're, for some people concerned about ozone problems, the NOx is important, but for most uses, it's PM 2.5. And so again, it keeps it all to just simple point and click, and you would run their high split model or V smoke. And the output that comes out ends up, let's see if it'll allow me to. So this may look like it's creating a very large kind of amorphous smoke blob here, but if you look at the concentration levels, most of that is in the 1 to 12 micrograms per cubic meter. Nobody's going to see that smoke. But we start getting into the 12 to 35, now we're starting to get into some smoke that people are gonna notice. And you can see here that it actually tracks the smoke as it moves, does get caught up against a couple of some of the terrain, and then starts to filter through. This is running a full 3-dimensional smoke model. It's not the simple model that V-Smoke is. It takes kind of like PB Piedmont. It's one where you click on that run model, and then you go get a cup of coffee and come back in about 15, 20 minutes to get your answer. It's not instantaneous. So it's not quite as good for game playing as V-Smoke is. You can't, necessarily play with your mitigation options as easily. But for looking at things as we get to the day of the burn, these are both PB Piedmont and Blue Sky are actually fairly useful tools, particularly for larger burns that would take longer periods of time, and you can't necessarily be as confident in having consistent weather as you would, for use of V-Smoke. So that's what I had. I apologize for the technology glitches. The Georgia site kind of being down kind of threw me for a loop, and I had to spend most of my morning trying to come up with something other than a live demonstration. It worked Friday.
Thanks, Scott. We appreciate that. We do have one question, but it might be better for Matt after lunch. I'll go ahead and read it, or Ken might want to weigh in. I believe this is someone from Florida. They're asking if V-Smoke or others mentioned in your presentation are recognized by Georgia's Forestry Service as a legal document to go along with the burn plan as a way for added protection as a burn boss. Smoke management issues, vehicle accidents, escape fires, other issues. So in Florida, they are required to use Florida Forest Service smoke plotter along with their burn plan.
Yeah, I don't have an answer about the law for the laws in Georgia. Yeah.
Okay, well, I bet you Matt's going to address that after lunch.
I can't say that for the case of smoke at night, using the PB Piedmont model, that is the only tool that does specifically smoke at night. That is the only tool available. That is the state-of-the-art science. So use of that would definitely help with any legal proceedings that result from any smoke incident, particularly smoke at night. It has been used in a lot of court cases.
Cool. And yeah, that V-Smoke as well as fire weather can be accessed on the Georgia Forestry Commission website when it's running. Someone else asked about the weather. And yeah, V-Smoke is really simple to use. You just need to know a few things about the size of your unit, the fuel loading, and your location, and it gives you a really good idea of where your smoke's going to go. But as Scott mentioned, you got to think about that night in the down drainage areas, because that might be different from your current winds. And also, if you're expecting a lot of residual smoke the next day, what are your winds for the next day? Kind of look at the future weather as well. So I think that's all the time we got for you, Scott. We'll fix to take a lunch break, I believe.
Yeah, well, now we're going to have a 1 hour lunch break. It'll be a virtual lunch. It won't be as good as the fried chicken we had last year and the 7 cakes and pies. But do the best you can. Come back at 1:15. We have 2 presenters after lunch. It'll be very informative. So we'll see you at 1:15. Thank you.